Okay, so the first step is to apply water to the paper. So we're going to flip it over and apply clean water to the entire back of the paper. Now this is Fabriano paper, so it tends to warp quite a bit. But what we're going to do is we're going to wet the back like so. And we're going to just let that soak in for a little bit before we flip the paper over. So that's step number one. And by a little bit, let's just go for a minute. So I'm going to stop the recording and then you can wait for a minute and then flip it over. Okay, I've waited for the minute. So now I'm going to flip it over and we're going to wet the other side. The brush I'm using here is, well, it's referred to sometimes as a hake brush, but I like it because it's good for coverage. The mop brush that you have essentially does the same thing. And so either one is good. Okay, so I'm just making sure that's thoroughly soaked, and because my easel here has a metal background, it sticks to the metal quite easily. So now both sides have been wet, and this time what we're going to do is we're going to wait, let's wait 2 minutes. So we went the second side, but while we're waiting our 2 minutes, we can mix up our paint. And what we're going to need is the Parrot red and then the Hansa yellow. What I'm doing with my Hansa yellow is I'm just cleaning it out a bit because it tends to go green if you're painting trees. So I'm just making sure that's all nice and clean and then wiping it off with a paper towel and picking up the clean Hansa that I just got rid of the green on. So Hansa yellow is one of those colors that really does have to be pretty pure when you paint with it. And then the second color we had was the Parrot red. So we're going to mix up a fairly big puddle of that. And what I'm going to use today is the Parrot red that I used to make your dry splotches. So I'm just going to mix up some of that. If it has a little bit of yellow on the paintbrush when you do this, that's fine. So we want a fairly big puddle. And in the case of the Parrot, we want it to be cream or coffee consistency. So it's got to be pretty thick there as you go on. Now, if you look at your paper, you should by now just see a slight sheen. So it's still damp, but it's got a sheen on it. And what we can do is we can test a little bit of that. Since we're doing a green background, if you want to test it in an inconspicuous area, you can see, okay, it's spreading, but it's not spreading a huge amount. So I can actually start the painting of the bird at this point. Now it still has quite a sheen and it's spreading all over the place. One of the other options is to take a paper towel and just put it over and lightly, you know, press it on and then take it off. And if it's soaking wet, that's going to help out a little bit. But we're not so concerned about it going out of the lines here. So our first place that we were painting was some yellow right on the top of the head. And we're going to put that on. And then at this point we can switch to our Parrot red. I'm going to switch to this bowl that I have here. I'm dabbing off my brush just in case it's too wet. And now I'm gonna add the red, and it is quite wet there, so I need a piece of paper towel, and I'm just dabbing the ball of the brush. So I'm not too concerned that it spreads at this point because we have, you know, quite a lot of red that we still have to do, and then we have that background that we're putting in. So we're probably in pretty good shape at this point. Just continuing on with that. Okay, so if your red is really spreading, it might not be thick enough, and then dabbing it off on your brush is a good idea. So it's a bit thicker now. You can see it's spreading less, and it's going on nice and dark for me at that point. So I'm just going to continue on around here, which is around this white part on his face. And then here I want to leave just a little bit of red there, but not so much. So I'm going to dab off the brush a bit, rinse it in the water, and then it's coming out as a really pale red here. Dab it off again, and then let's just continue on. Okay, so here we want a tiny bit of the Quin Rose because we want to remember that that is the top of his beak, or top of his wing, I mean. So we're just dropping in a little bit of Quin Rose here to help us remember that that's the spot that we wanted it to be dark. And if there's some Quin Rose still on your brush as you go down this part, that's okay. So we're just going around here. And I think the first time I forgot to continue on down, but let's just leave that Quin Rose to rest a minute while we finish off the front of the body. And I'm working from the wet edge, and I'm just continuing down the body. And it is moving a bit up here, but that's okay. It's going to make it really nice and soft. But you see down here, it's a little bit drier. I can see that it's a bit drier. Okay. And then there is also some red underneath that, but let's just use that as a break point, and we can continue on with the red that's down here. Now in this case, I want it a bit thick at the front, but a bit thinner like we did there at the back. So I still have quite a bit of paint in my brush here, and I don't want to put too much water back into the bird, but I'm just going to lighten this red by putting a little bit of water on my brush, and then that's going to help make the back part of the bird kind of shining, you know, showing like it's shining in the sunlight. And then as I get towards the front, I can dab off some of that water and make it thicker out here. So I'm picking up more paint and trying to make it a bit thicker as I go here. Okay. And then I'm just going to continue on down. Just pause for 1 sec. Okay, so we're just going to continue on again down to where we get to the yellow part. So I have a tiny bit more water in my brush. going to soften that out a bit. Just with water on the brush, dabbing it on the paper towel, and I'm going to soften this out so we don't have a hard edge. Okay, so if I see it's causing a hard edge, then I can, but make sure there's not a huge amount of water on your brush. You want when you dab it on the paper towel, it should be somewhat clear. And then just soften that as you go down. Now I think before in class we actually did the bottom part under the under here. I am recording good. Okay. So you can also do that just right underneath the front here. Okay, and then we did some of the lower feathers that were red as well. Okay, so at the bottom part, we'll just do the, oops, I got a bit of splash on there, but that's okay, that's going to be covered anyway. So what we want to do here, first, we've been painting for a while, so I just want to give it a little bit of water here so that it isn't dry when we apply this. Okay, and then I'm going to dab it off on my paper towel again. Sometimes it helps to have your paper towel in your left hand at all times. So here, I'm just putting that down. I'm okay with it blurring out like that. There is some sunlight actually on these feathers that go down. So I could, you know, when we do the green, we could just show that as a bit of white there as well. But I think that works well, what we got here. And it's going to really go right off the page there. So don't worry about what happens at the bottom here, because that will be covered in the end anyway with the green, etc. Okay, and then there was some dark green on this wing that comes off of here. So we'll do, or dark red, sorry. So we're going to do that part. And I did it on dry, and you'll see it never blurred or softened at all. I'm going to make sure that I soften this part because this would be facing the sun. But the bottom part there is going to be pretty dark, so I'm kind of okay with that. But we do want to make sure that it softens on this side. So I'm cleaning my brush, dabbing it off, and just making a little softer on that side. Okay, and that was pretty much what we did in class. I don't think we did anything else other than we might have come back up there with some Quin Rose, but I think we'll do that in the next layer. So that's up to what we did in class. So now we're going to come back in and do some of the areas in detail. Some of them will be done on dry and some of them will be done on wet, and others we will just wet a portion of the paper and do that area and then move on and wet another portion. So let's start with that. So the first thing I'd like to do is this light area that's almost a purpley color. So we're going to mix our purple. I think the nicest purple you can mix is the Quin Rose with the ultramarine. So we're going to start with that. And we don't want it too pink. And, oops, I used the wrong color there. And we don't want it too purple. So we want it just a very dull kind of pinky purple color. And we're going to do this on dry. Now what we want to do is we want to avoid where the eye should be white. So if you look at the eye, there's a bit of a white area around it. And then we're not going to worry about going into the black part here because that's going to be covered. And that's pretty much it for that first step. So step number 1. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to mix up a darker color. So we're going to take our Parrot red and we're going to mix that with a bit of ultramarine blue again. And that's going to give us a kind of a darker purpley red. And we're just going to use that to, maybe with a bit of Quin Rose, because I find if you use Parrot and ultramarine, sometimes it goes to kind of a dull red. But something like that. So a bit of Parrot, a bit of Quin Rose, and then a bit of ultramarine. And we're going to do a couple of things here. We're going to wet the paper where we want to smooth it out. So we're going to have one brush with just water on it. And then we're going to have the brush with the paint that we want to apply. So what I want to do is I want to emphasize the top of his wing here. And then I want to fill in the areas where his face is a little darker. So, or he's got dark marks on. So down here he has a dark mark. He has a dark mark there. There's a couple kind of here. So anywhere where you put those little dark marks in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our damp brush, not wet, and we're just going to smooth the one edge of that out. And you can have one hard edge and one soft edge, and that's going to help him. And you can do a little bit more around here because we don't want that showing as much, and a little bit underneath here. So that's probably good. There's also some dark right here. So we're going to put that dark in, and then we're going to take our damp clean brush and we're just going to spread that out. Now if it's not dark enough, you can add a little bit more ultramarine because this part here is actually quite dark. So we're just adding a little bit of ultramarine, and then I'm taking my damp brush and I'm moving that out a bit. You could also add a little bit of Quin Rose there if you find it looks kind of brown instead of, you know, a dark red. And we can put a little bit of that down here too. So that's pretty much it. There is a couple of darker spots in his wing, but I think we'll leave that until we do the next layer. And then there is one dark spot that kind of comes down here. So I guess we can put that in now. We could probably put the bottom of his leg in, just so we remember where that is. And that's pretty much it for the dark spots. You can also, this line here, you can soften it out a little bit on one side as well. So there he goes. I think I should turn the light on here. Okay, so our next stage is to actually do the feathers, which should be a lot of fun. So what we're going to do is we're going to wet with a smaller brush, not a big brush, just wet down the wings again, depending on how far you went. Mine dried in the meantime. And I'm going to go right up into the red to wet it as well. I want to keep this white that's over here. So that, excuse me, that's going to be important to be able to show that little bit of white that's on his back. But what we'll do here is we're going to start with a light coating of the Parrot. And the reason we want to do that is we want to be able to blend the color in nicely with the following color. So I'm just going to go up into here, but I'm going to avoid this white area here. And since it's wet, it should flow down nicely. And then the next color I'm going to take is my gamboge. And it's going to be a thicker mix for the gamboge. I don't know if you can see that. Yes, you can. So I'm going to take my thicker mix, and then I'm going to take my paper towel, and I'm going to dab that brush off so that I'm going into pretty wet paper, but I've got a very thick mix. So it's going to blend nicely with that yellow. And then go down here a bit. I'm going lighter on the one side. Now I want to go in with my Hansa yellow. So that's the cooler yellow. Same thing, I want a very thick mix of that yellow. So I've got to pick up a lot of pigment in order to have a thick, almost cream mix. So it's got to be, let me see if I can show you that. It's got to be very thick on the paper. And I'm covering over top of the gamboge as I go down with that one. Okay. And I'm actually kind of mimicking the feather directions that I'm going on. And then the next color I need is blue. So I can either use my phthalo blue, which is a greeny blue, and I think that might produce a better combination there. So I'm going to have to get my phthalo blue because I don't have it here. So I'm just going to pause you. All right, so for my phthalo blue, I don't need much at all. Fortunately, my paper is still wet, so it didn't take me that long. But what my phthalo blue is going to do, it's a bit too thick. I'm taking it actually right from the tube. So I got way too much water on there, and at first I had way too much paint. What I want it to do is just create a nice green. If you see, there's a slight green at the bottom there. So I'm trying to blend this back up a bit. I'm now going back into the yellow, which is a very dangerous thing to do. But I think I kind of got the green there. And now I'm going to take a little bit of my phthalo blue, put it on my palette over here so you can see it. So there's my phthalo blue there. And I'm going to take a little bit of my ultramarine blue as well. So those two blues are going to help. Now the phthalo blue is going to be very thin because I want it to look be the lighter part of the wing. So we'll do that very thin. You'll see there's a tiny bit of green over here. So you can put a tiny bit of green down in that part. And if your green didn't turn out green enough, you can add that in. And then the trick here is to have not too much water on your brush. So just keep dabbing it off on your towel or your sponge and make sure you get the belly of the paintbrush when you do this. So This time again, I have too much paint because I'm using it fresh by the from the tube. It's a little harder to manipulate. But okay, so that is a lighter blue that I'm applying here. And it does kind of go up this way a bit, so I'm just gonna add that in as well. Okay, and then this lighter blue kind of drops down this way a bit. So now I'm going to go into my ultramarine blue and get a nice thick mix of that as well. Okay, and that is going to be the blue that comes down here. Okay, and there's kind of a little shadow or something as it comes down this way. So it's a very thick mix. You see my brush is not even wanting to retain its shape, but it's important that it's a thick mix so it looks dark enough. So by thick, I mean, in this case, I'm taking it right from the palette. Okay, and there is a bit of it under here, which I think is partly a shadow somewhere up here. And this has an angle like that. If you look at the reference photo. Okay, and you can also paint up into the wetter paint, so you know, if it doesn't seem to be blending, you can, if you go up, it helps it look feather-like. So we can go up like that and up here as well. Okay. All right, so that's that. And then we may as well finish off the blue for the feathers that are going to out this way. So again, we're going to start with phthalo. I'm not sure if it's necessary to wet this. I think only at the back because it's very dark at the front. So we're just going to put a bit of this lighter phthalo in first, and then there's another one that comes down this way almost over top of the red. Okay, but it has sunlight on the bottom of that one, which is interesting. And this goes again over top of the red. But it has sunlight on it. So we need to come back in with our ultramarine blue, super thick in the areas where it should be thick. So one area is there, or should be dark. And another area is back here. It helps cover up this red. And on this one, the only place it's really dark is coming down here. So that leaves us with this purpley color that we have underneath the this wing here. So we're going to mix our ultramarine and our Quin Rose again. Quin Rose, ultramarine. And we can just add that down here. The other blue will start blending into that. it gets redder once again. So you can add a tiny bit more Queen Rose for that part where it's red. Okay, and then in the middle of here, it's also got a dark spot that blends up into this part with a tiny bit of phthalo there. So we can put the tiny bit of phthalo in here. And that part is almost reflecting the light, so it would be very light, this little wing that's right out here. Very light. And I think there's a bit more yellow out here. Now that it's kind of dry, we can add this part that looks a bit like it's additional wings with some yellow on it. So we'll blend that in as we go back to the next stage. So that's that. The only other thing is the red down here in the feathers that are way down here could use a little bit of that purple. There's some purple in front of this one. Now yours might have gone off the page by now. I have a somewhat bigger one, so I'm just filling in the rest of this. So now I'll go over to Queen Rose. Some Queen Rose on top of that Parrot. Okay. And then some Queen Rose back here as well. It looks kind of dark right under this wing here. And then I would go maybe a bit more Parrot, like this, making this shape that's coming down here. Okay. And don't worry about the light on this side, because we can do that with when we do the background. So you could, if you want, you could put a little bit of pink there, and then we'll cover up that part in the background. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it. The only thing I don't like here is we have this hard line. So everyone would have some sort of scrubber brush. We can get rid of that before we finish up here, just by going down the line. Now it may just be a pencil mark, so if it's a pencil mark, some of you have a very skinny scrubber that's a bit, you know, harder. So if it's a pencil line, you can actually erase some of these pencil lines sometimes with these scrubbers. But I'm just trying to blend this across so it's not as noticeable. Okay, I think that's about it. We'll probably have to do another coat of yellow over top of this. I don't think it worked out quite as colorful as we would like. But that's the end of that step for now. All right, next step is to do our black that's under the beak. And we're not going to use black this time. We're actually going to mix our black, because I think you get a better black from mixing. So maybe I'll just clean this up a bit. What we're going to do is take all our primaries, ultramarine blue, Pyro red, I have over here, okay, Spiral red, ultramarine blue. And then we'll use our phthalo blue. Okay, add that in. And we got a nice brown there. So we need a bit more phthalo blue. Okay, so it's tending a bit towards the red. So in order to counter something that's tending it towards the red, maybe yours is not. Now I was actually realizing I wasn't touching the right phthalo blue. But then you add the complement. So I'm going to add a little gamboge to this. It's going to tend towards the green. It's tending toward the green, then you add some red. So I added some red and I'm starting to get something that almost looks like a black. Maybe a bit closer to a green, so keep adding red. And now I've got the color that I need. So every time you don't like the color, if it's too green, you add red. If it's too purple, you add the complement. So you go to your color wheel and figure it out. Now, why would you mix a black and not use the black that's on your palette? This is going to be more harmonious with the painting that you're doing if you use a black that you mixed from the colors you've been using in the painting. So that's why we're doing that. So everything's dry. We're going to go along our beak. This kind of goes up in this shape. And then on the reference picture, there's a little bit of a pointy part there. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to go down to where it starts to meet the fur. And where it starts to meet the fur, or sorry, feathers, we can start adding a bit more pyro red. And that will help it blend into our feathers. And that's pretty much it for that. You might want to add a couple of dots of this color up here. And the only other place you see it is you see it a bit on the beak. But I think we'll wait for that because this border here we want to keep very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very hard-edged. So we can go to the eye. The eye, all we want at this point in the eye is a black circle. Okay, and start out small, do it smaller than you think you need to. And then we can make it bigger after the fact. There's a couple of spots on the bird that are darker that you could probably, let's have a look and see if there's any. Then the foot might be a good spot to go into. And really it's just wrapping around this branch here, that foot. So we'll put that in, and then we'll rinse our brush, dab it off on our paper towel, and just go in with that water and let it blend up from the bottom shadow. And that's our leg. Okay, so that's done. There's a couple of really dark spots there. A couple down here. But I think what you should do is maybe make this a bit watery. And then that would help to put these on, because you don't want too dark in any one area. There's a couple of shapes down here, feather-like shapes that you can put in, just lines and then feathers. Okay, and there's a couple of shadows underneath here. So you put a shadow in. And there's one coming down from the blue here that's pretty dark. It's got that shape to it. So we could do that. And then over here, there is a couple lines underneath here. And we could probably make this darker under here as well, because that is, that would help. I think that's about it. I'm tempted to do this spot here. I think it's okay to do that. And then there's another spot right underneath it. Okay. I think we're good. Okay, I have to wait for that to dry. You could attempt the branch, but let's leave that for a later stage. Okay, I'm back. So what we're going to do here is just finish off this area, because I realized that I've got a lot of hard lines in this area, and I want to correct that. So if you watch the whole video, then that's something to avoid from the beginning. But you can also see that the bird actually has some feathers coming out the bottom that would be touching the branch. Now we don't want too much focus on that. So what we're going to do is just wet the area, because if we don't want too much focus on something, then it's better that it is soft edged. And we're going to take some of that Parrot that we had. We'll make this kind of feathery shapes as we come down here. Okay, and this would be in shadow, so it's going to be a little bit darker. There's also some blue in there, a lighter blue, so a lighter phthalo that we can drop in there. And I think it will just help give the right proportion to the bird. And then it seems like there is a little bit of yellow. We're going to use gamboge in this case. That's just peeking out from behind. So that's going to help that area there. And then we'll soften it out. And when we do the background, this part here will actually, oops, I think I just moved my thing. When we do the background, this part will be covered with the background anyway, but it would just help that all to kind of fade out a bit more and not look as noticeable. We can probably have this come down just a little bit and matching it on the other side. Okay, so that's a bit darker over there. And then we have this blue that's very, very dark. So what I would do is take the black, if you still have some of that left, and just mix your phthalo in with that. See how much we can bring out the phthalo here. Okay. I was actually using black there, but so we want a dark color there. I think I'm going to put some ultramarine in it as well, because I don't really want it super bright. with the phthalo. So now we're getting it darker with the ultramarine. And I could put a touch of Queen Rose in there just to dye that down a little bit. So what we're doing is this part that's really dark along here. And it actually starts up here. And then it's underneath that green. And then these feathers kind of have a feathery part to them. So that's the part we're doing, is just this really dark part that goes underneath. And then there's part of that that's under this particular feather on this side. And I think that's going to help a little bit to have that in there as well. And you can have that move up, cover the top of the leg a little bit. Okay. And then I think it would make sense to kind of have it blend in more at the top. So we're just gonna take some clear water, dab it off on your brush, and just soften these edges as well. Okay, I think that did the trick. Might be a little dark coming up here, but again, we're just going to soften that off against the yellow part. Gotta give it a little bit of green in there too. Okay, so that's that. And then we can go on to the beak, but before we do the beak, let's just do another layer of our purple. So take our purple that we already had, and what we're going to do, I just want to look at the picture, there we go, is we're just going to put these little marks that are on his face in. He's got one coming around his eye and up here. And you can just put some little dots in and then take some clean water, dab your brush, and for the dots, just kind of dab them a bit so that smooths them out a bit, and that helps make his face look a bit more realistic. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. Maybe I'll put it up to the camera so that you can see it. So that's what we did. Okay. All right, and now the beak. So the beak is very pale in color. I do notice that we could have gone with a tiny bit of red up here. So I'm just going to add that in, because there really isn't a lot of dark up here where there should have been. And it's okay to have red at the top because that would reflect into the beak. And then we need a very pale yellow. So in order for yellow to be subdued, you would add purple, its complement to it. And what you end up with here, that was our prior mixture that we used on the face. you end up with a kind of a dull yellow color. You could add a little bit more yellow into that. Not too much though. And that will form the beak color. So we're just going to go down, put that color in, maybe a bit more water because it is a little bit dark. And then just get rid of any hard lines that might be there. It's okay if some of this red goes into the beak. He does have a tiny bit of black at the bottom of this beak. So if you have, you can just add that to the bottom of his beak. And that's what we got there. So it's hard to figure out how to position this. So that's how what we got there. All right. Okay. Okay, so I moved it a bit closer. That will probably help. Our next mission is to mix up a brown for the branch. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use a flat brush. So in order to mix a brown, I basically need, I can probably use this blue mixture that we just used, but I think we're going to need to use that again. So let's go with the Parrot. And then you can probably use the phthalo blue. Let me just try that with the Parrot. Okay. And then we need a yellow. And I think gamboge would be the better option there. So we got a green. We want to get it to a brown. So I'm adding red. Getting closer. I'm not sure how dark I need this to be. So I'm going to do it a bit thicker. Red. Some gamboge. Okay. And then I'm going to add a little bit of phthalo again. Just make it green. So I need to add some more red because it's too green. Okay, so it's not a bad color. It's not a great color. I might try to add a little bit of ultramarine. Yeah, it's going back to the green. Let's try some Queen Rose. It's too red. I need to add some green, so that would be blue and yellow. Okay, getting there. Slowly but surely. Okay. Not bad. I think we'll go with that. It's not the darkest. Start from outside of where you want to paint. And actually, you could even try doing this first because we want some dry brush marks. So I'm trying to get a lot of the paint off my brush so that I get some dry brush marks. What helps is if you hold your paintbrush almost horizontal to the paper. That helps a bit. And then we're going to go down here. Try to create some dry brush marks down here. The branch is definitely not the highlight. So not to worry about making it perfect. Okay. Not too worried about what happens close to the bird at this point. And then I can go in with a bit darker here and there on the branch just to give it some texture, give it some dimension. I'm just scrubbing it kind of on my paper so that it goes that way. And it's okay if it, you know, it has little knots in it or something like that. Whatever you want to do. Like, it does help to have a bit of a bend to it or whatever. So you could do that as well. Okay. I think that's good enough for now. So it's a bit darker at the bottom. And then it's lighter at the top. Okay, done. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just a glaze over top of what we already have there. The reason I want to do that is I really don't think we have the brightness that we need. So we're just going to repeat our colors. We're going to do it on dry paper this time. And so I'm starting with my Parrot red. I'm just getting that in. I'm trying to avoid the spots that might be white. And then I'm next going in with my gamboge. And a glaze is typically done with not too strong of paint. So you're just, or too thick a paint. So it's more like a milk consistency. And now I'm going in with my yellow. This is my Hansa yellow. Putting that in. I notice there's quite a bit of yellow along the back here, so it gives me that opportunity to add that in as well. That might be glowing in the sunlight. And then it seems to drop down to about here. And then I'm going to add some blue to that to create that green. So that was my Hansa yellow, and I'm adding some phthalo blue to that to get this really nice green. And I didn't notice that there's actually a fair amount of Hansa yellow up in this part. So if you get a really thick mix of Hansa, dab off the ball of your brush, you can drop some more of that down in here. Okay, I don't know if this is helping or hindering, but I figure why not try to do a glaze over top of this. And then back to my phthalo blue again. I'm going to drop that in. I'm going to drop a little bit of phthalo blue right up here because I also noticed that his wing doesn't extend far enough up there. So dropping that up there. And then just continuing on with our phthalo blue down here. There's kind of a greenish feather that comes across here. So I'm going to throw that in there too. And then we're going to go into our ultramarine blue. So the same pattern we did before. We're just getting it darker and darker every time we go over with this glaze. Okay. And I'm just trying to identify that feather that sticks out there. And that's all we wanted to do with that part. What do we still have to do? Oh, we can put some more red on the bird's chest. I don't think there's enough Parrot here, so we're going to do the same thing, do a little glaze of the Parrot red, kind of a tea consistency again, and just get that in as well. I think there's also an opportunity to put a bit more here. since we're doing it on dry paper, the other thing this can do is give a little bit of texture where you need it. Okay, so we're going to go in with our Parrot again. This is still damp, and we're going to start doing, just take your brush and do some C shapes. You don't have to do tons of these, just a few over top, so it kind of gives the impression. And you can even add Queen Rose to that, because Queen Rose might show up a little bit better over top of the red. A little bit of texture here and there. Okay, and then in some cases the red goes down in certain areas. We can add those in. And then in some cases the green actually goes up a little bit. So if we take our phthalo and we go up this way, we can start showing some of these marks. And you can use your really skinny brush for this too, but just make sure your paper is damp, not totally wet, because you don't want these spreading too much. Okay, and then do the same thing with the blue. Just add some feather shapes. We have this one here that we want to emphasize here. So, and then along here, you can use the yellow mixture. So take your gamboge and your yellow, and you can do that in a few areas, soften out the ones you just did. You can curve them at the end so they look like feathers. But don't get too detailed, because this is really kind of a loosey-goosey approach. That should do it. I think here there's just a little bit more yellow, so if I go in with some yellow there, that might help. So it kind of extended that red down a bit, and we added some shapes to the red. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just a glaze over top of what we already have there. The reason I want to do that is I really don't think we have the brightness that we need. So we're just going to repeat our colors. We're going to do it on dry paper this time. And so I'm starting with my Parrot red. I'm just getting that in. I'm trying to avoid the spots that might be white. And then I'm next going in with my gamboge. And a glaze is typically done with not too strong of paint, so you're just or too thick a paint, so it's more like a milk consistency. And now I'm going in with my yellow. This is my Hansa yellow. Putting that in. I notice there's quite a bit of yellow along the back here, so it gives me that opportunity to add that in as well. That might be glowing in the sunlight, and then it seems to drop down to about here. And then I'm going to add some blue to that to create that green. So that was my Hansa yellow, and I'm adding some phthalo blue to that to get this really nice green. And I didn't notice that there's actually a fair amount of Hansa yellow up in this part. So if you get a really thick mix of Hansa, dab off the ball of your brush, you can drop some more of that down in here. Okay, I don't know if this is helping or hindering, but I figure why not try to do a glaze over top of this. And then back to my phthalo blue again. I'm going to drop that in. I'm going to drop a little bit of phthalo blue right up here because I also noticed that his wing doesn't extend far enough up there. So dropping that up there. And then just continuing on with our phthalo blue down here. There's kind of a greenish feather that comes across here. So I'm going to throw that in there too. And then we're going to go into our ultramarine blue. So the same pattern we did before. We're just getting it darker and darker every time we go over with this glaze. Okay. And I'm just trying to identify that feather that sticks out there. And that's all we wanted to do with that part. What do we still have to do? Oh, we can put some more red on the bird's chest. I don't think there's enough Parrot here, so we're going to do the same thing, do a little glaze of the Parrot red, kind of a tea consistency again, and just get that in as well. I think there's also an opportunity to put a bit more here. Since we're doing it on dry paper, the other thing this can do is give it a little bit of texture where you need it. Okay, so we're going to go in with our Parrot again. This is still damp, and we're going to start doing, just take your brush and do some C shapes. You don't have to do tons of these, just a few over top, so it kind of gives the impression. And you can even add Quin Rose to that, because Quin Rose might show up a little bit better over top of the red. So a little bit of texture here and there. Okay, and then in some cases the red goes down in certain areas. We can add those in. And then in some cases the green actually goes up a little bit. So if we take our phthalo and we go up this way, we can start showing some of these marks. And you can use your really skinny brush for this too, but just make sure your paper is damp, not totally wet, because you don't want these spreading too much. Okay, and then do the same thing with the blue. Just add some feather shapes. We have this one here that we want to emphasize here. So, and then along here, you can use the yellow mixture. So take your gamboge and your yellow, and you can do that in a few areas, soften out the ones you just did. You can curve them at the end so they look like feathers. But don't get too detailed, because this is really kind of a loosey-goosey approach. That should do it. I think here there's just a little bit more yellow, so if I go in with some yellow there, that might help. So it kind of extended that red down a bit, and we added some shapes to the red. All right, so next we're going to do his eye. What I'm going to do is loosen this up a bit. See how close I can get for you. It's not bad. I could probably get closer, but it's going to be hard to paint around the camera. But let's try it.